Hey friend, welcome to the Self Care Isn't Selfish podcast. I'm your host, Emily Nichols. As a Whole30 certified coach, wife, busy working boy mom, and your self-care guru, I'm here to help you start putting yourself first without the guilt. Each week you'll hear motivating and practical tips on how you can create a habit of self-care through interviews with my amazing guests or quick solo episodes with me. After each episode, you'll walk away with an action plan and feel empowered to implement what you have learned into your life. So grab a cup of coffee, glass of wine, or your favorite sparkling water, and let's do this. You're listening to episode 56 of the Self Care Isn't Selfish podcast. Welcome back, friend. I'm so glad you're here. Thanks for joining in. Hey, have you joined my free Facebook community yet? I really think you should. There's a link in my show notes to join us over there. But we're going to continue the conversation each week from each week's episode here at the show, but also just talk about life together. So I love my community so much and the discussions we've been having so far. So make sure to join us over there just to have some connection with some other women who are looking to make self-care a priority in their lives and really just talking about the challenges in doing so and how we can overcome together. So, I'm always looking for new things to add into my self-care routine, and I'm all about a holistic approach when it comes to wellness. And I had been hearing about EFT tapping. I just heard about it in passing here and there. And then via social media, which is a blessing sometimes, I came across my new friend, Casey Vanputten, and she's an EFT tapping specialist. So before I introduce you to Casey in our interview, let me tell you a little bit more about what EFT tapping is, if you're like, what in the world are you talking about? So EFT, it stands for Emotional Freedom Technique, and it's pretty much an alternative treatment for physical pain or emotional distress. So you actually use one or two of your fingers and you're tapping on different points in your body. So it focuses on what are called meridian points or energy hot spots to restore the balance to your body and your energy. And it's believed that restoring this energy balance can really relieve symptoms, maybe a negative experience or emotions may have caused, whether you know it or not. So this is very similar to acupuncture, where certain points of your body can do an emotional release or are connected to other body parts for that matter. My husband did acupuncture when he wasn't sleeping well, and it was a game changer for him. When I heard about EFT tapping, it's like, man, this sounds really, really interesting and super easy and accessible to do and easy to learn. But I also thought this would be good not only for me, but for my kids as well as they're returning to school and anxiety may be a little bit higher for them. These are some techniques they can use within the classroom as well. So let me tell you a little bit more about my guest today, Casey. So Casey Vanputten, she has a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in school counseling. She's actually worked in various schools and different age groups, even as a high school guidance counselor. And now she's a certified EFT practitioner. Can I talk? And she's the mama bear to two kiddos of her own, but she's super passionate about equipping other moms with the powerful tool of EFT, which is another thing you can add into your self-care routine toolkit, this EFT tapping technique we're going to be talking today. But she equips women with this tool so they can move from feeling anxious and overwhelmed to feeling calm and in control. And Casey sent me some fun facts about herself, which I think were super fun. So she played basketball in Spain, went skydiving in Mexico, bungee jumping in Las Vegas, and got a tattoo in New Orleans when she was only 16 years old. I think that's super fun. I love it when my guests share fun facts like that. So make sure you listen all the way to the end of this episode. As always, I'll be sharing my 3 biggest takeaways from my interview with Casey, but something really interesting happened. So after our interview, Casey mentioned, hey, want to do a session together, an EFT tapping session together. And we did it via Zoom, and she led me through the technique and we kind of talked some things out and how to do it. It was life-changing. I can't even begin to explain the way I felt afterwards. And I had no expectations. I thought, oh, I'm doing great. Even with everything considered, I'm doing fine. But this was such a big emotional release for me that I didn't see coming that made me feel 20,000 pounds lighter. I can't wait for you to hear this interview with Casey, learn a little bit more about EFT tapping, and stay tuned to the end because I'm going to share my own experience of EFT tapping that Casey took me through and how it made such a positive impact on me. So enjoy this interview with Casey Vanputten. All right, gang, thanks again for tuning into the Self Care Isn't Selfish podcast. I'm so excited to learn and hear from my guest today, Casey Vanputten. Casey, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me, Emily. I'm so excited.
Hey, me too. Like I said, I want to learn from you today. I think this is a really interesting subject matter we're going to cover today. But before we get started, I want to ask you, Casey, what does self-care mean to you?
Yeah, so I knew this question was coming, so I thought a lot about it, and I'm like, oh, that's actually a really good question. So self-care for me is just almost reminding myself that I am worthy of that attention. I deserve, my mind and my body needs to get loved on. And I think as a mom, as a wife, I tend to get pulled in a million different directions, and I'm wearing a million different hats, and I feel this pressure to be, everything to everyone. And so for me, it's like hitting the pause button, checking in with myself. And for me especially, I think, it's really nice to get your hair done. It's nice to get your nails done, all of those pieces. But for me, I know that I need to check in with my emotions. And so self-care for me is really getting to that grounded space where I can be my best self. And I have learned many tools along the way, and one of them I'm going to be sharing with you today. But those are the tools that help me the most with my self-care routine and help me to be my best self.
Absolutely. Well, and I like how you said you're hitting the pause button because I feel like we're fast forwarding like all the time through
Yeah.
life and checking in with yourself, which can be hard to do.
Yeah, especially I think now with everything going on in our world, it's really easy to get caught up in everything and to kind of lose your feet a little bit because we're in a pandemic right now, and we have some other things going on in our world today.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really easy, especially with social media and the news and all of those things, to get sucked into those. And as a sensitive person, I know that I can only do so much, and I know that it has to start with me.
Mm-hmm.
And so self-care is really important for me to help others. I have to help myself first.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about you a little bit more. Can you share a little bit about your story and what you do and how you found to do what you do today?
Yeah. So girl, it's been a journey. I'm telling you. And I feel like it started with day one. So I had a series of medical challenges throughout my life. And it started with, I had crooked feet. And so I had to have casts on my feet. And from that, I had developed a hernia from picking up the heavy casts with my feet. And then while the doctor was in surgically fixing the hernia, he ended up twisting my ovary, which came back to bite me later. And then I was diagnosed with hidradenitis because I was having cysts all over me. So I had to have a surgery to remove the cysts. And then in high school, I was passing out randomly. And then I had a really horrible pain in my side, and I ended up going to the emergency room, and they found out that I had the shingles, which I thought only old people got, but I got the shingles. And then they also found, through trying to scan and figure out what was wrong with me, they thought I had a tumor the size of a golf ball on my ovary. But long story short, they found that it was actually probably the doctor that worked on my hernia had actually prolapsed my ovary, and then it was decaying and building up decay on it. So it was just crazy. And then when I passed out on an airplane, like just random things, and always lots of mystery rashes. And whenever I would go through stressful events in my life, like I look at when my dad had his heart attack, my body would respond, and it would end up breaking out in rashes in different ways. And I never really made that connection till later on, but my body was responding to the stress that I was going through life because I didn't know how to cope. So I would just shove it down and I would just keep on going. And I did that throughout my life. But finally, like when I was going through college, I started to get some of those things under wrap and found some alternative treatments to handle my skin and some of those things. But the worst thing that could have possibly happened to me did happen my last semester of college, because I was so protective of my body. And I felt like, without clothes, I looked like Frankenstein with all the war wounds I had. But I ended up, I was date raped. And for me, I always kind of thought that happened in like a dark alley with someone you don't know. And this was someone that I knew and trusted. And that was like a shock to my system. And so for someone that had gone through so much trauma with my body, this was like the final straw for me. And it really affected me. And I look back, and when you look at the definition of trauma and looking at the isolation piece, which is a lot of what we're experiencing right now, is not being able to talk about things. I tried to talk to my friends about it, and a lot of them either just didn't understand, or they didn't believe me, or they asked, just random questions about it that weren't appropriate or helpful. I tried to go to a support group, and I was the only one that showed up.
Oh, yeah.
I went to a counselor and didn't have a really positive experience with that. So I felt really, really alone. But I did what I always did, and I just kept powering through. And I was an athlete, and I was a really high achieving student. And I ended up getting a 4.0 that semester, which is crazy.
Wow.
But because I buried all of that down, it ended up surfacing later on in my life. So a couple of months later, I met my husband, who was like a gift from God, just so supportive. And I told him on my first date, I'm like, listen, like, I'm a hot mess. Like, there's the door if you need to run now. And he didn't run. So it was a godsend for me. And, but really after having children, so my first one, I was kind of able to hold it together, but with my son, I feel like he came out swinging from the chandeliers. Like that boy, really ignited my healing journey, because I couldn't hide it anymore. I was sleep deprived. I was, I'm like a couple hours from both sides of our family. And so I was kind of forced to do a lot of stuff on my own. I couldn't just hand them off to grandma. And so looking after two kids, and then with this trauma, that I hadn't really sorted through, it really kind of got brought to the surface. And I think kids do that for us. They're like a mirror for the unresolved pieces of us, and they just really bring that out. So that's what happened. And I was like, enough is enough. Like, I am not my best self now. I'm not sleeping. I have zero energy. Like, I always dreamed of being like this amazing mom. And I was not that. I was, short with my husband. My marriage was struggling. And it was kind of in that moment that it was like the come to Jesus moment, like, I need some help here. So I ended up going to like just a regular doctor, and I walked out of there, and she's like, okay, here's a prescription for sleeping pills. Here's a prescription for anti-anxiety. And I walked out of there with them in my hands, and I was like, gosh, there's just got to be something else. Like, I'd been on an antidepressant before in high school because of all the medical adversities and everything. And I just didn't want to go there again. So I was like, maybe I'll just try something different. So then I went to a holistic doctor, and he tested my adrenals and my cortisol levels. And cortisol is your stress hormone. And when we got those results back, I was not surprised, but I was surprised, because I was like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, I am a hot mess. It says right here on the paper, because I had no cortisol left. I had depleted everything. So it was then borrowing from other hormones. So I'm like, okay, so what do we do now? Like, we know that my cortisol levels are like nothing. How do we fix this? And so he's like, well, you can do yoga, and you can do meditation, and those types of, activities will really help with you support your adrenals and get your cortisol back to where it needs to be. And I'm like, well, yoga takes a lot of energy and I am exhausted, sir. Like, I don't think this is going to like fall asleep in child's pose. Like, I don't see this working out. And meditation, I would sit down. I had tried meditation before, and that's when my wheels would spin the most. And so I'd be like, what do I need to get from the grocery store? What do I need to do tomorrow? Or I would end up like spiraling in the, poor me, or thinking about my deepest, darkest times. And that wasn't helpful either.
Right.
So that's when I went home and I Googled how to regulate cortisol levels in a natural way. And that's when EFT popped up for me. And that's when my journey kind of began.
That's amazing. Another godsend for you, for sure. Well, and I think it's so interesting. I don't think a lot of people, and I'm sorry you experienced all of that trauma in your life. And I recognize that that was really hard for you to go through. I don't think a lot of people recognize that sometimes trauma can manifest physically in your body. Just your body is just holding on to all of the emotions and the tension and the feelings, and just, it has to get out some way.
Yes.
It has to get out some way, and it just manifests in strange ways sometimes.
Yeah. And I remember going to yoga, even when I was in college. That was the moment that I had kind of put the pieces together that I had been raped, was in the middle of a yoga class. So I had done a certain position, and all of a sudden the tears just came streaming down my face. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is what happened. And still, yoga for me still makes me cry at times, but it's just, they call your hips like the junk drawers of your emotions, right?
I've heard that. Open up those hips, it all just comes out.
Girl, you don't know what's going to come out of there. And so I think, trauma is held within the body. And I think where we're kind of falling short with a lot of the traditional counseling therapies is not incorporating the body enough.
Yeah.
And so that's what I was so drawn to. My background being in counseling and psychology, I was like, wow, this really makes sense to me. Incorporating the body is important because the body holds the score, the body holds the trauma, and bringing that into, it has just infinite wisdom in the body. And so bringing that forward in a session or when you're working through stuff is just really, really important.
Amazing. Well, tell us a little bit about what EFT tapping is. What is it?
Yeah. So it just looks so weird. I mean, you just have to acknowledge that it's the weirdest thing ever. And I still think it's weird. But it kind of just made sense to me. So when I was pregnant, I worked at a high school down the street, and I worked with smelly teenagers. And I was nauseous all day long. So nothing worked for me. I tried all like the little, they look like cough drops or whatever, like all these different things. I was taking ginger, but it wasn't until I got those bracelets that have like a little bump on them.
Yeah.
And I put those on my wrists, and oh my gosh, those help so much. So I started wearing them on car rides. Like, I was just rocking out the wristbands, but I was like, wow, these really work for some reason. I don't get it, but it works. And what it was doing was acupressure. So when I looked at EFT, which is stimulating different acupressure points on your body, I was like, oh my gosh, like, maybe this could work. So EFT in a nutshell is a blend of ancient Chinese medicine, the meridian systems, very similar to acupuncture, but they're blending with modern day psychology. So you're tapping on these points, and it is releasing stress from the body. It is working on those meridians to clear the energy, any type of clutter, or if you think about like a river, trauma creates dams in that river. So by tapping on these points, it's lifting that dam and allowing the river, the energy to flow through your body. It also works on the brain. So when we are under stress, which many of us are right now, our stress alarm is going off. And that is the amygdala, and is a fight, flight, or freeze response. And it's responsible for survival. So those people at the grocery store, at the beginning of all this, that were like hoarding toilet paper, they were in their survival brain. Like, you can't hate on that. They weren't thinking clearly. That's a different part of your brain. they were in the emotional part of their brain and they were acting out of survival because their amygdala was saying like, you need to do this in order to survive. So that part gets activated in times of stress. So what EFT does is it turns that amygdala off. So it says, I got you, you don't need to sound that alarm anymore. It flips that switch, and then it just sends, the relaxing, calming hormones to the rest of your body so you can get grounded, so you can think clearly. And so it's a self-help tool, which is just life-changing and extremely empowering. And what I love most about it, because when I felt triggered, and we feel triggered all the time, especially if you're a mom, your kids are going to trigger you in a million different ways. When you feel triggered, I had something that I could finally do. So it's a self-help tool, but then it's also can be utilized as a clinical tool. And that's what I'm using now as a practitioner is that, and I've been the client as well, in sorting through some of that trauma. So I worked with a practitioner. I didn't try to do that on my own. And I don't suggest ever working through trauma on your own. I worked with someone that could hold space for me and could really give me that love and attention that trauma deserved. And so utilizing as a clinical tool, you work through those big pieces, and then the little pieces that kind of pop up throughout the day, you can utilize it as a self-help tool. So it's really unique in that way. And I think what I love most about it.
That's amazing. So so if people are envisioning this.
Yeah.
So you're actually taking a couple of your fingers and you're tapping on different parts of your body.
Yep.
In regards to like acupressure or because I know my husband's done acupuncture before when he was having sleeping issues, and it was the only thing that helped him sleep. The medication and stuff was a nightmare. That's a whole different story. It was just interesting how these different points in your body were connected to other parts of your body and emotions. So say if I was that person, really scared and running out and getting all the toilet paper and that survival mode, where would I tap? Like, what would I do to kind of help relieve that?
So EFT actually evolved from a therapy called thought field therapy. And thought field therapy was having a different protocol of points that you would tap on with your fingertips for each emotion. And so for sadness, you tap here, 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 and here. If you're angry, you tap here, here, and here. Well, Gary Craig, the founder of EFT, came along and he was like, man, he was a Stanford engineer and he was studying under Roger Callahan, who was the founder of thought field therapy. And he was like, this is a lot to remember and this is not very user-friendly. How about we make it where we can tap on all of the points for whatever emotion, whatever thought, whatever feeling you're feeling. And that's when the magic kind of happened. And that's why it's so user-friendly, is because you're tapping on the same points no matter what you're experiencing. And whether you tap on a point, which is EFT, you press on the point, which is acupressure. And then if you put a needle into it, that's acupuncture. So we're actually doing the same thing. You're just stimulating that meridian endpoint in the same way, but we can use our fingers. We don't have to use the needles. And so, but lots of times I don't even go through all of the points because I have my favorites. And I know that different points are related to different motions, and they're also related to different organs in the body. So when I feel sick to my stomach, or if my kids are having stomach issues, I'm telling them, we've nicknamed it the potty point now, but like underneath your eye is the stomach meridian point. So just tapping underneath your eye or pressing into it. I've had clients with fibromyalgia where tapping on it is too much. It hurts them actually. So that's fine. You don't have to tap on it. You can actually just gently press on it and have the same effect. So, so you don't have a specific protocol like thought field therapy for every emotion. You're just, everyone picks it up so quick. So it's just a series of points. There's 9 of them. The first one starts on the side of the hand, on top of the head, the eyebrow, outside the eye, underneath the nose, the chin, the collarbone, and underneath the arm. And you're doing that every single time. Or you can just pick a point and tap on that one. So your collarbone is a great point for anxiety. And so I will tap here, or if I'm giving a presentation, I might even just put my hand over that point and stimulate that point to make it more discreet, which is really important for people, because if we're at the grocery store and we're feeling, triggered in some way, you may not want to tap on your head in the middle of the grocery store,
Sure.
So it's good to have those discrete ways to tap. And for kids as well, I'll teach them to, tap on you can tap on your fingertips too, which aren't what we commonly use in EFT. We will sometimes, but that's not in the traditional sequence that we use, the basic recipe. But fingertips are a great way to tap very discreetly. They can do that under their desk.
Right.
So it's good to kind of have EFT, emotional freedom techniques. It has an S to it, right? So it's not just emotional freedom technique, it's techniques, because there's so many different tools and techniques within the technique. And so it's giving you a toolbox of ways that you can, have self-care and take care of yourself in those moments when you are feeling stressed.
Well, it sounds so user-friendly, and you could do it anywhere. And you just mentioned teaching your kids how to do it. And I'm super interested in that, especially for my youngest son, who's 8, who's going into 3rd grade, when they, fingers crossed, God willing, go back to school. And
Yes.
please. I think he does have a little anxiety in the classroom sometimes. And I could feel like this could be a really good tool for him to help him feel a little bit more at ease in the classroom. How do you teach kids to do EFT? It sounds pretty easy. How's that saying go? Oh yeah, all things are possible with coffee and mascara. Well, that's certainly true for me, and I love to have my coffee every morning after my workout, and I don't really leave the house without mascara. So my fellow blondies, I know you feel me on this. But gang, check it out. Having my coffee every morning is part of my self-care routine, and I always take my coffee blended with nut pods and coconut oil. So nut pods is a dairy-free creamer. It's made from a blend of almond butter and coconut cream. I love the French vanilla flavor. It's my favorite. It's super yummy, super smooth, but even better, it's Whole30 approved. So gang, head on over to nutpods.com and use the code EmilyNichols22 to get 15% off your first order of Nut Pods. That's EmilyNichols22, EmilyNichols22. And let me know once you receive your Nut Pods what your favorite flavor is and how you take your coffee. So remember, just head on over to nutpods.com.
Yeah, and actually with littles, you can teach just 4-point tapping, so you don't even have to use all the points. You're keeping it really simple. But they've done just tons of research, and they've even used it with the Sandy Hook kiddos after all of that happened, that tragedy. There were several EFT practitioners that went in and taught teachers and worked with the kids, and so it's really the modality really shines after trauma. But these kids are just being traumatized and triggered in so many different ways that I feel like every kid should know this now, because it's just the day-to-day stuff. So I teach it really simple, but as a mom, especially, modeling it is like step one. So getting familiar with it, utilizing it yourself, because what I found, my kids have been tapping for, it's been about 6 years now. When I was doing it, over and over again, I never hid from them. What if I felt emotional, I would just start tapping. There were times when I would hide in the closet and really let it out, but I also wanted them to know that it's okay to have emotions and it's okay to let it out. And this is how mom takes care of herself. And so I really didn't even know. And at the time, there wasn't a ton of research and there wasn't a lot of books written about kids. That is like blown up in the past 5 years. But at that time, I didn't know. And so there were a couple songs, there were a couple of books that I introduced to the kids. But I found one day, just to give you an example, I had tapped so many times, and Grady was itty bitty at this time, probably maybe 2 or 3. And there was a mouse in my backyard. And I was terrified of mice, absolutely terrified. And so I kind of threw him in front of me and I was like, let's go check it out. But how about you check it out first? Cause you'll probably think it's cool and I will freak out. So we kind of inched towards it and I watched him in front of me start tapping on the points.
Wow.
So he recognized that he too was nervous and he could have been just kind of soaking it off of me. But I watched him and I was like, holy crap, I never even really taught him. I have just been modeling it this whole time. So the more that we kind of own it as a tool for our own self-care and our own mental health toolbox, the more your kids are going to respond and think, okay, well, this is something mom does. Because if mom's screaming and throwing chairs, what is that child going to learn? What do you think they're going to do when they get angry?
So interesting. Yeah. Monkey see, monkey do.
It is so true. So true. So step one is just getting comfy with it for yourself and learning and utilizing it for yourself. And really that alone can help your children, because when we shift ourselves and shift our own energy, I wish I would have had this even when my daughter was, because she used to throw some crazy tantrums. Being able to just be like, yep, you can, throw down, you can have all those emotions and just sit with it, instead of now you're feeding off of them and now they're feeding off of you. And now you're going back and forth. To keep yourself grounded and just sit in that space and allow your child to express their emotions and get it out, so that they don't stuff it in and then it come out in different ways, right? Which is what we've been programmed to do. My mom was an amazing woman. She is tough, but she was like, buck up, buttercup. And like, you are not to show your emotions, like it's sensitivity was not really recognized as a superpower, like what I teach my kids. And so it's a different generation. I think we're all just kind of trying to learn, but the biggest thing is like being able to shift your own self before you even start to work with your children.
I love that. Well, and so I'm super interested in this. Like, I'm going to start tapping after we get off this interview.
Yes.
Is this something, so I have my own self-care routine that I do in the morning, throughout the day, and the evening. Is this something that you wake up and just not even consciously know you're doing, and you just start doing it as part of your own self-care? Or how could someone start incorporating this into their self-care routine?
Yeah. So I started off, I read The Tapping Solution by Nick Ortner. And I feel like even the first couple chapters were just kind of eye-opening for me. Just like what we were talking about before, how the body just kind of holds on to the trauma. And it was just really interesting for me to kind of understand why EFT works. But there's so many different ways you can utilize it. You can absolutely get up in the morning and just start tapping, and you can build it into your morning devotion or meditation or whatever. I tend to not be a morning person. And so I'm rolling out of bed and I'm like, ooh, eyeballs half open, like grabbing my tea. And I just kind of fling myself into the day. At night, though, is where I tend to tap the most. So my brain will start to swirl, and I'm looking through the day and I'm looking at, what did I do wrong today? And all those pieces. And that's where I begin to apply EFT, is just to make peace with my day. If anything popped up during the day where, that was difficult for me, I will apply EFT to that. And that way, doing it right before bed is great, because it relaxes your brain, it relaxes your body, and it puts you into a more restful sleep, which is so incredibly important for us right now. Because if you have restful sleep, then you wake up well rested, and then you start your day with a full cup. But if you are having that erratic sleep, and sometimes you can't control it. If you have babies or you have puppies, like it's hard to have, it's hard to have that regular sleep. But the more that we can kind of relax ourselves right before we enter sleep, it's really helpful. So I like to do it right before bed. I try to make a practice of that, but I'm also tapping throughout the day, just whenever I feel like I need it. And that's kind of the beauty, is you don't have to set that time, aside to like, okay, 10 minutes, I have to do that, kind of like what you do for working out or whatever else. You can just kind of weave it throughout your day too.
Like, I could see myself doing it while I'm making dinner.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. That was one of my biggest triggers. I'm not a good multitasker. I've learned that about myself. This just not a good multitasker. So for me, cooking, and then I have the kids, running around in the house. I have, my phone is going off. Like that was not my shining moment. And so I did a lot of tapping when I first started. And I'm like, what is this feeling? Oh, it's an overwhelmed feeling.
Yeah.
Oh, and even that alone, for me, is I didn't have the labels for emotions.
Mm.
And so being able to say, what am I feeling right now? And do I feel that in my body right now? Because I didn't understand that piece so much of my life. Those were big questions that I just had never asked. And then applying a tool to it was like, the cherry on top. So
This is an amazing tool. I feel like anyone and everyone could use and should use. And it's so easily accessible. And like you said, and something that won't take very long, but has very amazing side effects, if you will, to help you feel your best.
Yeah. Some positive side effects, some good side effects.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah. And
Well,
I actually go ahead.
I was going to say, where can everyone find out more about how to get started with tapping on their own? Because I'm sure if I was listening to this, I'd be like, okay, what were the touch points I need to start with? And how do I tap?
Right. And so I think the tapping solution for me, that's kind of where I started.
Right.
I like Nick Ortner has like a tapping summit, every couple months, and you get free information. They have all the guest speakers come on. That's helpful. You can also join my Facebook group, Mothering Freely, with EFT. Like I give lots of free information on there. I do all kinds of videos. I do tap alongs. I've kind of hit the pause button the past couple of weeks because we had a death in our family, and I am just applying lots of self-care to myself. And so, but I will be more active on that again and pick up in the next couple of weeks. So, and I do interviews, like I'm interviewing the principal of a local school right now that has implemented tapping into the school. And so the teachers have been trained, the students are doing tapping each day. And so I'll be interviewing her next week. And so there's lots of interviews. I do fun things in there. But that's a great resource for moms, especially to start off with.
That's amazing. Well, I'll make sure to include links in the show notes to the Tapping Solution book and your Facebook group as well, so people can follow along with you, Casey, and learn a lot more. So where can everyone find you online? Like I said, we'll put this link to your Facebook group, but where else do you live online?
Well, it's so funny because through all of this, I was doing mostly in person. I love doing like workshops for MOPS groups and moms clubs. And we talked about the stigma-free or bring change to mind groups. Like I absolutely love connecting with large groups and presenting my story, talking about EFT. So the majority of the people that I was finding were in person. And so I did mostly in-person sessions in my Fisher's office. Well, with everything going on and lots of e-learning and whatnot, I'm like, what is this going to look like in the fall? I ended up pulling the plug from my office just because I think for me, like, I don't want to have to worry about, that if there's another rise and all this craziness, like it just felt for me, this is a really good time to focus on the virtual space and pick up my online business. And so I just started working with a virtual assistant. And so right now I'm like strictly on Facebook. I just started on LinkedIn, but I pretty much live on Facebook is the biggest thing. I have an Instagram account, but I'm not active on it. So if you want to find me right now, I'm just on Facebook, but I hope to blow up pretty soon after.
Yeah. I mean, after this interview, everyone's going to be Googling, where can I find Casey in this tapping? Oh my gosh. This is such an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for sharing your heart with us today and this amazing tool. And I love that it's so easily accessible to people and can really help make a difference in people's self-care and mental health, which we all could use a few extra tools in our toolkit right now.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. It's so much fun.
You bet. You bet. Okay, gang. I know you've been waiting to hear about how my EFT tapping session went with Casey. But before I do, make sure to check out the show notes. Casey has been so kind to include a freebie for us, linking you to all of the EFT tapping resources you would need to get started. Okay, this is a wonderful resource that Casey is providing to us. If you want to take it a step further, you can schedule a virtual tapping session with Casey and experience the release of EFT that I had as well. So thank you again for that, Casey. I think that's just a wonderful resource to provide to our audience. Okay, so let me tell you about our session. We did it virtually via Zoom because obviously COVID, all the things. And I'm not going to tell you exactly where we tapped because I don't want to tell you wrong since you're listening to this conversation, but check out the resources Casey gave you because it'll tell you through it, through her resources where you tap to get started and the point and those particular points and what they mean. But we started off just kind of talking about how I was feeling, if I felt any tension in my body, if I could, correlate a color to how I was feeling or how my discomfort was feeling in my body. And we just went through some affirmations. She would say them according to how I was feeling. I would say them back. And it was just affirming that, yes, I feel this way and that's okay. And we went through one whole sequence, went through all the tapping points. And she said, okay, how do you feel? We took a couple drinks of water and just chatting with her more, I said, I haven't felt super anxious, but I started to feel a little bit more anxiety leading up to making the decision if my kids were going to go back to school or not. And I also, just in with talking to her, she's made me feel so comfortable. I was like, I have been feeling anxious, but I don't want to show that to my kids because I don't want them to feel anxious about going back to school or making that decision as well. And she's like, okay, does that change the way you feel on your body or colors? Like, no, not really. So we went through the tapping session sequence again. And within I think the second point, I just felt this release. I started to feel lighter and I started crying my eyes out. I could not say the affirmations back to her. It was an out-of-body experience, you guys. It was an emotional release that I didn't realize I needed to release. Just through this tapping session and just saying these things out loud that I was feeling and that was okay. The feelings of, not being in control right now and that was okay. And how I was just releasing it through this tapping technique. It was just insane to me how just tapping on these points in my body released this tension that I didn't realize I had. So we went through it. I got myself together and she was like, how do you feel now? My lower back wasn't aching anymore. And she was like, do you have a color you can attach to how you're feeling? I said, I felt the color yellow. I felt lighter. I felt happier. It was so amazing. And since then, I've been tapping anytime I've been feeling anxious and saying my own affirmations around that, and then that's okay. I've been tapping before I go to sleep at night. It makes me feel calm. I've been tapping in my cold showers, even, y'all, to start off the day. It's an amazing tool to put in your self-care toolkit, and I can't recommend trying this enough. So let me share my other 3 biggest takeaways from this conversation with Casey and from what I experienced from doing a EFT tapping session with her. So number 1, your body and your mind are connected, but we just don't always listen. Like she mentioned, sometimes when you're doing this tapping technique, you're opening up the dam and letting the calming hormones go through your body instead of your stress hormones at an all-time high, like your cortisol levels. I tell you what, when we did this session, the dam was opened for me and it was flowing out full force. And sometimes you need to listen to your body when you're feeling this discomfort or pain or, sometimes my stomach gets upset when I think about things that make me anxious. And this tapping technique can really help connect your body and mind and help you feel better. But we're so busy, we don't listen to our body and how our body is connected to our mind. And it's trying to give us physical cues that we need to de-stress and let that stuff go. So remember that your body and mind are connected and you need to open up the dam sometimes. Number 2, find solutions when it comes to your health. So Casey experienced a lot of trauma, and she took the time to go through her own journey to find what would work for her, which ended up being EFT tapping. I feel like sometimes we give up too soon on ourselves. We go to our doctor, they prescribe us something, and they're like, oh, no, you're fine, whatever. You're giving up too early on yourself. There's a lot of really great holistic toolkits out there to help you feel your best. So if you're feeling a certain way or going through some type of ailment, keep going till you find a solution. Don't give up too early on yourself, because you may just find a tool like EFT tapping that can be life-changing. And number 3, model for your kids. So like Casey said, she does tapping in front of her children, and her children just start doing it as well. I've been showing this technique and talking to my youngest son, Tyler, he's 8, about this, because he gets a little anxious sometimes in new social settings or at school. And she kind of explained some tapping techniques we can do with him. And I've just been doing it in front of him as well. And I tell you what, he's really open to doing it, and he's doing it on his own too. But not just with tapping, but anything you're doing, you are modeling to your kids. They are watching you. So knowing that you as their parent are getting up and taking care of yourself and working out and doing this, they're watching you. You're modeling for them. Okay? So think about that and the lifestyle you're living, and what you are modeling for your kids and how you want them to feel and live their lives as well. So I hope you enjoyed today's episode. I certainly enjoyed this conversation, and I am super appreciate Casey for taking me through this EFT tapping session together. I released the dam that I didn't even know I had built up, and it felt so freeing. And this is such a simple technique, y'all, you can do at home. So make sure to check out the show notes. I have a link to the book, The Tapping Solution, if you're wanting to learn more, and the freebie Casey created for us, and links to her Facebook group to learn a little bit more about how she helps moms eliminate the overwhelm and anxiety and just release it, y'all. Let that stuff go. This is such a big form of self-care. And right now, where overwhelm and feeling out of control is still going on, any technique you can add to make your life a little less chaotic and let the calm in instead is super beneficial to you. I hope you loved today's episode. Please leave a rating and review if you loved what you heard, and go give me a follow on Instagram at EmilyNichols22 and at Self Care Isn't Selfish Podcast. And let's continue the conversation together over in my free Facebook group. Go to the show notes again and join us. I can't wait to talk with you all more about this week in the group, and what you guys think about EFT tapping and if you've heard of it before. So thank you all again for listening. And thank you again, Casey. This was such a wonderful experience, and I so appreciate you. I love you all. Thanks again for listening. And remember, self-care isn't selfish.